has been a big part of our heritage here in Texas. It brings a lot of joy to have people to come out here and have quail to hunt. Being able to walk with your friends and talk and converse was just a huge deal. But grassland birds are in a big decline, all grassland birds.
We're getting brush encroachment and woody encroachment throughout grasslands, which are not just changing the composition of species within the landscapes. That's actually really bad for the planet too, because grasslands are massively important for things like carbon capture. So if you're not seeing quail on the landscape, it's usually a pretty good indication that that landscape's probably not doing as well as it should be doing.
In 2010, the quail population went from bad to worse. Most of the time when we're trying to evaluate populations, we're looking at the weather, we're looking at the habitat, and in that particular year, the habitat was great, and we still had this big decline.
It's really concerning because you immediately start to think, man, what else has happened?
Nobody knew what was going on, but it really needed to be figured out.
When something that drastic happens, who are you going to turn to? You need people out there in the field that totally understand the whole environment. Rolling Plains Quail Research Ranch jumped in and got to work on this.
The Rolling Plains Quail Research Ranch, as far as we know, we're the only entity that is solely dedicated to the study of quail and quail habitat. Our initiation came about from a group of hunters reminiscing about how good the quail hunting used to be. The thing that each and every one of those guys has in common is that they say to me, "Oh, Ryan, when I was your age, there was birds everywhere, there was quail everywhere. I could go out and by 10 a.m. in the morning, I could have a limit of birds, and now we don't see that." Since 1980, we estimate we've lost about 75% of our quail. But 2010 was a really nominal year because we had great habitat throughout the region, great rainfall. You should have great quail. We saw exactly the opposite. Everybody hit the fields, and there were no birds. Nobody could explain that. So we needed to get out there, we needed to hit the field, and I'll be honest, we didn't know what the heck we were looking for. And so we started looking at everything.
We are so blessed to have such an amazing relationship with all of the staff at the Rolling Plains Quail Research Ranch. They were coming out, capturing quail. They would weigh and measure them, band them, to see if they could help find an answer as to why quail were disappearing.
First things we're going to start looking at is what's the nesting cover look like? What's the availability of food on the landscape? What is the extended habitat looking like in the larger picture?
We concluded that study around 2014. The one thing that really stood out were these parasites, these eyeworms and cecal worms. The infestation rates of these worms in these quail was far, far higher than anybody had expected.
Now that we've figured out this cause, if the Riblins or another landowner called us up, potential solutions can be evaluated and pursued. Through education and habitat work, we are starting to see some of these quail populations come back in some years.
We're not just there for when times get real bad. In a state where 95% is privately owned, we need landowners to be part of our mission. A big part of our mission is educating youth and landowners on, hey, what is good quail habitat, but for the benefit of other species too.
When the Riblin Ranch was first established, to me it looked like dirt that grew rocks. There was a lot of overgrowth of trees and bushes. It was not very well maintained. It has transformed. It's beautiful.
There's very few things when it comes to managing my land that I do without talking to somebody, and many times it will be the Rolling Plains Quail Research staff. They're always there to help. Land sculpting, prescribed fire, funding for a lot of this place. There's just a tremendous amount of help that they can provide that a lot of people can't.
We're here as a resource and as a service to Texas landowners. You can come out to our ranch or a private ranch, and we will demonstrate in the field how to implement some of these habitat recommendations from a research perspective. Give us a call. We're always happy to get out of the office and hop in a truck and come see some new country.
Our ranch brings so much joy to my life. There's always something exciting to see. It's my belief that all people need to have a better connection to the outdoors. If you lose quail, you will lose another opportunity. Get out, get in it, understand it, enjoy it.
All right, howdy, welcome back. Did y'all enjoy the Monarch release at lunch today? Raise your hand if you went. Woohoo, okay. Well, we're gonna get started, and what a great segue to our next discussion. Rolling Plains quail set themselves up for success by implementing long-term monitoring and by having strong relationships with partners and landowners. They were able to build on that foundation to understand the issue, implement solutions, and understand outcomes through continued monitoring. We often see our partners place a significant amount of effort on evaluating project opportunities, but not on budgeting the time it takes to select partners, build relationships, and monitor progress. Unfortunately, this leaves a lot of projects short of reaching their full potential. And how does a conservation project realize the outcomes envisioned? Successful conservation initiatives uniformly show strong collaboration and attention to ongoing monitoring to provide project results. This enables adaptability of the project and the ability to claim data-backed outcomes. And today we're going to talk about just that. I'd like to introduce everyone to Travis Etheridge, the Director of Environment and Sustainability at Apache Corporation, Billy Tarrant, the Associate Director of Stewardship Services at Borderland Research Institute at Sul Ross State University, and Sam Ebright, a GIS Specialist at Natural Channel Design Engineering, Inc. The discussion will highlight lessons learned in implementing programs and evaluating progress for projects in West Texas. Texan Nature, and me personally, has worked with each of y'all over the past few years, and currently we have some projects going on, and I'm excited to sit down with each of you today because you guys all have fantastic insights to share with everyone here. From this conversation, our hope is that you take away best-in-class examples of partner selection, baseline measurement, and program planning, tools and thoughts on partner communication and progress monitoring and reporting, and lessons learned that can help you reduce barriers in developing partnerships and monitoring protocols in line with operational strategy. And as mentioned today, be sure to check out our supplemental resources. Our team did a great job putting those together that provide additional examples and tools related to this conversation. And Travis, you're up first.
Okay, perfect. So as Taylor mentioned, my name is Travis Etheridge. I'm the Director of Environment Sustainability at Apache Corporation. We are a global exploration and production company centered in Houston, but with operations in Egypt, Western Desert, the UK North Sea, and Permian, West Texas. We also have exploration ongoing in Alaska, offshore Suriname, and Uruguay. I'll point out some of our core values: stewardship in the blue, light blue down there being probably the most pertinent to this conversation, and our strategic framework focused on oil and gas, building a portfolio of high quality, and then maintaining financial discipline and top operational performance. Operational performance is where we would encompass some of our environmental stewardship activities. So a little bit on the project background. In 2023, we were setting a long-term target to accelerate P&A reclamation in the Permian Basin. So, we P&A wells, and we have to go in and reclaim that surface land. And, we wanted to accelerate, but we also wanted to partner with Borderlands Research Institute to make sure that we're doing the latest and greatest, the best possible way to reclaim this surface area. So we picked 25 P&A well pads in Midland County. set it up into 8 different plots with different surface treatments. It was really important to us that we had a baseline, or we set a baseline that was reasonable for the company, and that's something that we could actually implement if the results came through in a positive way. I would use the example that, historically we rip and flip a pad, so it's all caliche, and then you want to tear it all up and you want to flip it over. When we first started the design, there was a question on whether we needed to tear out this caliche, bring it off to the side, bring in topsoil, irrigate routinely. And if anyone's been to West Texas, the rain's sporadic at best. Topsoil is not really existent. So we wanted something that would be a good use case that we could actually implement in the future if all of our results came in as we hoped they would. So we started in mid-March 2024, prepping the pads. We're kind of midstream right now. We have, I think we're completing our fall observation of the locations right now as we speak. So far, Billy and I talked to our project manager at BRI last week, and he said he was pretty surprised with some of the results that are coming through in a positive way. Our expectation is to go and conclude next year and have a white paper that's available to other operators and folks who can use this information to hopefully improve their reclamation programs. So here's an illustration of the way the project grid is laid out. As Taylor mentioned, planning phase is super important with all of this. We have landowners and key stakeholders that we need to engage with. They need to have similar time frames, need to be happy to let us onto their properties after we've P&A'd wells. We need to make sure that our P&A or reclamation activity is timed correctly with the project kickoff. And I think that this was probably the most challenging part of the whole planning phase because there was a lot of back and forth and working with our land department. So the current status, we do have 25 properties in Midland County that we've treated. We've just, like I said, we're in the fall observation phase right now. So getting to some of the key takeaways, I think, is we're kind of 3/4 done with the project. Partnership, as we talked about, is really important. We need to have similar perspectives and motives. We need to be flexible and be open to new ideas and other expertise. And make sure we're constantly communicating. Fit for purpose. It aligns with our objectives of environmental stewardship as a company, but it has to be the right project, and it should have a fit for purpose and be aligned with future operations. And it's got to be cost competitive. I think I heard it on the last panel as well. If you're competing for dollars across different projects, and then transparently, it's difficult when you're at end of life. You got to go and they're not income producing anymore. So it's all, after the fact closure dollars. So it needs to be cost competitive for the company. And it needs to be practical and pragmatic, something that you can implement in the long term. And then the last thing is just plan and deliver. We need to make sure we have the right design and right plan. We have manageable expectations on what the outcomes should be. We have something that's fit for purpose for the organization, and that what I want to do at the end of it is take the information and be able to replicate it across the field. I want to be able to take the information and make a better outcome with same or slightly more money.
Perfect.
Are you in the Permian Basin?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Travis. Billy, you're up next.
You manage your time so well. Hi, I'm Billy Tarrant. I'm the Associate Director of Stewardship Services at Borderlands Research Institute at Sul Ross State University. Quickly, you can see the mission for BRI there is to help conserve the natural resources of the Chihuahuan Desert borderlands through research, education, and outreach. The team that I supervise, the Center for Land Stewardship and Stakeholder Engagement, is we don't have a separate mission. We just have a plan, I guess you would say, we were created as a result of the Respect Big Bend initiative, which I've been on the stage talking about before, a few moons back, with the goal to facilitate effective conservation in Far West through assistance to landowners and coordination with relevant stakeholders such as conservation partners. We're going to talk somewhat about some more about this Apache well pad reclamation project, which has been a really, really good project to work with Apache on, and we're also going to talk from Sam, I think, about the Delaware River Basin Restoration Project. Both of those we're involved with at some level quite a bit, and I've been involved with obviously a lot of partnerships through the years, but right now I want to talk about the Trans-Pecos Pronghorn Working Group and this restoration project. And the reason I want to do that is because we go way back to 2009, and it's still ongoing. And it was a landowner-initiated working group. We learned a lot. We've done a lot. And I think by taking that look back, it's something I'm very proud of, that I was involved in that. I think it can teach us a lot. I'm not going to go into the components for success. Obviously, buy-in from our constituents. You have to have some financing. I'd say work to minimize conflict. I think that happens quite a bit in conservation work. My executive director for Texas Parks and Wildlife for 15 years was Carter Smith. It was my boss for most of my career when I worked with Parks and Wildlife. And he said something one time as we were talking through some conflict. He said, we can all sit on our hands and get nothing done, or we can charge forward, recognize there may be conflict, and if there is, how do we mitigate it? And I thought that was a life lesson. If you're not in charging forward and getting things done, we don't talk much about conflict, but it can happen, or people get their feelings hurt. I think it's important for conservation partners to feel valued through the entire process. That's usually what happens, is they don't feel valued, and you need to keep them dusted up and ready to go, get the work done. Lessons learned through this project, it's still ongoing, but we've learned a lot. I think being open-minded and understanding the need to adapt strategies as you go to change your trajectory. And that goes back to the challenges we had with drought while we were transplanting pronghorn. Even our panhandle land, we were moving pronghorn from the panhandle to the Trans-Pecos, and even though they typically don't like the farmers in the panhandle don't like pronghorn on their fields, and it was a good source to transplant to the Trans-Pecos, it was they see enough of them go, and then they don't have a few babies for a few years, and they start to like them a little bit more. And so we had to wait a few times. I want to talk later about this never waste a good crisis and Trans-Pecos landowner attitudes. It's Texas by Nature is going to let me dive in that just a little bit. Try to be as inclusive as possible. Plan extensively, but always stay flexible. Understand conflict's inevitable again. Be proactive about utilizing monitoring results to build support. I think that's one of the things we're talking about here is how not only do you monitor, what level do you monitor, how are the data reported, but it can really help you if you do it right. And I say this because I could tell you we're not monitoring enough on all of our projects. We're just not. But this one we did, and I'll talk more about it here in a bit. We put a lot of collars on a lot of pronghorn and learned a lot. And we not only learned about how to keep them alive for long periods of time, we learned about what the best way to trailer them is. We actually rewrote, because we took such an effort. Because this was a landowner-driven project, Parks and Wildlife got behind it with a lot of funding. They felt it was valued. Landowners really stood it up. And they stayed after it and continued to stay after it. And because of that, we learned so much. In fact, Dr. Ryan O'Shaughnessy was a big chunk of that. The guy who was in the last video when he was at Sul Ross. But I'll talk more about that in a bit. But it also allows you to continue to get funding, right? You show results, you can continue to get funding. So, sorry.
Thank you. My name is Sam Ebright. I work with Natural Channel Design Engineering in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm the lead geospatial analyst and a commercial drone pilot. A little bit about who we are. We're a river restoration, civil engineering, and natural resource planning firm with 25 years of experience in in-stream habitat and restoration, channel morphology, post-fire flood mitigation, GIS remote sensing analyses, hydraulic and hydrologic modeling. These are some of our photos from some past projects we've done. And what brings us here today, we were working with Texan by Nature this year and with other partners, Billy and others. What we set out to do was to analyze about a 500,000 acre landscape, to analyze this from a coarse scale to a fine scale, all the way from remote sensing data, satellite imagery, and aerial imagery, all the way down to meeting with landowners on the ground, getting in their rangers and understanding what their problems, priorities, and needs were. What this graphic represents is sort of what our workflow looked like on this project, how we combined multiple layers of data to move from a eyes in the sky view to being on the ground into a final suitability analysis to really understand where conservation can be most effective on the ground, and a photo from one of our beautiful sites on the Delaware River. We learned a lot through this project. This was a challenging project. This was a huge project, the biggest landscape that we've ever worked on in the past 25 years, and we learned a lot. Some components for success that we had really strong landowner and multi-party stakeholder involvement. That meant that we were not only working with the funders and the project partners, but we were working on the ground with the ranchers and understanding what their needs were, having lunch with them and understanding what they could learn and teach us from generations on this land. We integrated desktop modeling and field verification from a top-down and a bottom-up approach, which I'll talk more about in our conversation. And as I mentioned, we learned that a really strong component of this was meeting landowners on their own terms, on their own land. We drove about 25 hours round trip to do that, and it was well worth it. And again, we had really strong support from our partners. We had really strong support from Texan by Nature, as well as the funding organizations, and helping us to make those connections with the landowners on the ground. And some lessons that we learned from that were oftentimes in conservation, we think about a top-down versus a bottom-up approach, but I think that it's really important to integrate both and put that into adaptive modeling, giving yourself sufficient time from what you've learned on the ground, what you've learned in the sky, and rebuilding that model, not staying stagnant and saying that we have all the answers when we get out there, but remaining flexible to really understand. And finally, recommendations for others. As I mentioned, I find it really important to integrate the top-down and bottom-up approaches. There's no one size that fits all, especially when you're working in a landscape like Texas, which is 95% private land. You really have to learn from the generations of people who've been on the ground before you. As I said, engaging stakeholders on the ground, this was a really powerful tool, being able to get in the back of pickup trucks and Rangers and have lunch with these folks and really understand what their needs are and how we can help them achieve that, because we're not just here for ourselves, we're here to put more water into the ground, we're here to help put more forage on the ground. And again, allowing flexibility for that adaptive management, never being stuck in one stage of your developmental process, but always realizing that you need to have flexibility. And something that I've always taken from my time as a firefighter is to clearly define the task, purpose, and end state as a leader. If you're looking for shovel-ready plans, if you're looking for landscape analyses, be very clear in what the task is, what is the reason for that, and what is the end state that you're looking for.
What counties were you in?
Excuse me?
What counties?
Culberson County.
Also just Culberson.
Thank you, Sam. And I can set that over here. Okay. Well, Robert ended, his last key takeaway was collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. And you're going to hear a lot of those same themes in our discussion today: collaboration, the importance of data, monitoring, etc. So we'll jump into it and start with you, Travis. And you mentioned fit for purpose and being cost competitive, along with finding solutions that you can replicate across your operations. And why do you consider conservation a strategic investment for Apache Corporation?
Yeah, I think one of our key stakeholders is our landowners. I think working with them to make sure that we leave it better than we found it is really important to us. We live and work in these communities too, and so it's important to us that it gets restored as you would want it. And as I mentioned, we have conservation and environmental stewardship is one of our sort of key core values. And so it's kind of ingrained in the company culture that we do what's right by our landowners and our employees and serve our purpose well. It's just kind of part of who we are. So I think it's really ingrained in the culture.
100%. And how did y'all, has it always been ingrained in the culture, or how do you build that internal buy-in, especially as you bring on new employees or new staff, or as companies merge and things like that?
Yeah, I think those are all challenges that you try and overcome. I think it has been in the culture for some time. Apache's been in the Permian Basin for quite some time. And, we have, I think just a lot of grit and determination to make sure that these things get done well. And when you bring in new people and you bring in new ideas, it's always important to get them brought on, but also I think you mentioned the costs for capital and operators. Yeah, and that's kind of back to that fit for purpose design that we talked about. It's really if the operator and the pumper in the field and the folks who are actually going out there and scraping the pad can see what the results are whenever you do some of this work like we're doing with BRI right now, it really makes a case for itself.
Yeah.
And if you make a good case for itself, then everybody wants to get it done the right way.
100%. And we worked with y'all in the past on some of the dark skies work, and we would they would tell us, or McDonald Observatory would tell us anecdotally, the fields or the folks working on the sites, they see the lights change, and it's like such a noticeable difference, day and night, literally. So, yeah, great point. And Billy, are you hearing the same thing from other industry partners y'all work with out in West Texas?
Yeah, well, fortunately, we work with, our main industry partners we've worked with in the past have been like Apache, and used to be Concho, now ConocoPhillips, and obviously those were two organizations were heavily involved in Respect Big Bend and are conservation minded. But I think through their leadership of oil and gas companies like that, we're beginning to see more of that, more opportunities, more interest in doing good conservation work, and having a noticeable impact on the land for sure.
100%. And I mean, all the work that y'all do in the energy industry depends on the land you operate on, so it's super important. And then next question for all of you. The first discussion talked about barriers. Want to talk about that again. And what are the biggest barriers integrating local conservation opportunities into overall sustainability strategy from your perspective? And Travis, we can start with you.
Okay. I think always it's going to be cost and time, and sometimes those are tied one to one. Challenging for money, especially with low oil prices, and you get really tight with money and capital and LOE and operating dollars. It's a constant fight. But again, if you're doing the right thing and they can see that it's cost effective, and you're doing something that maybe costs twice as much but is 10 times as good, you can sort of show those results, and it becomes a way of doing things that can be infectious.
Yeah. Billy, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that from the NGO standpoint, and then in this case research standpoint, we do some monitoring as well, obviously, for our work. Not near enough, I'll say again, on some stuff. Thank goodness we got Sam to help us out on that project. And then we had Lalo on this one. I think the key is, like I think Lalo said it the other day, is you have to work with, especially if you have a funder and they want to go somewhere with this project. It's great to bring your vision to the table as well, but at the same time, at the end of the day, is it going to be cost effective? Is it going to be something they're interested in? And they need to drive that ship, and we have to be flexible enough as natural resource professionals to understand that and provide them the product that they're asking for. And I think this project was a great example of that. I think it's been just, Lalo said it first, the whole rip and flip idea of leaving that layer of caliche would not be something he would want to do. He'd want to get it out of there and have a soil profile as much as possible. But as soon as they said, well, that's the cost-effective way we do this, we're not going to be able to haul that caliche off. He said, okay, fair enough. Let's charge forward and let's try it and see it. And it's so far, we don't have the pictures right now, but Lalo shared some the other day from the field, and it was... We'll see what it comes back. It's pretty impressive, really. The second year we got a little more timely rain, and anyway, I think that's part of it. Is put aside your mindset of what you want to see done, and make sure that your other partners and your funders are getting what they want.
100%. And in the first conversation, we talked a lot of barriers can be avoided by just sitting down at a table and being transparent about expectations. So I think that's exactly what y'all have been doing. But Sam, anything to add to that? I know y'all work with lots of different clients, so.
Yeah, I really like how Billy said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Over the past decade or so, we've been working in a lot of post-fire flood restoration, and a lot of that has been in our own backyard, in the homes that our employees live in, that our neighbors live in, and really getting to the table with those people and saying, this is why we need a conservation easement, because it's going to keep the water out of your garage. People really listen when you can bring the story home to them. And I think really being able to understand by seeing those floods over the past few years, by seeing the restoration, a really good example is that we had an area that actually reburned twice about 10 years later. And after the second burn, they were already calling us before the bear team got out because they knew that these methods would work. They knew that we had to start planning now.
Perfect.
Thank you. So takeaways, planning, lots of conversation, over communicate and collaborate. To move on to our next question, Billy and Travis, this one is for you. And once you've done all the work and overcome all these barriers, making it sound easy, and gotten internal buy-in on the local project, what are the biggest challenges or mistakes you've experienced or witnessed as projects are getting started and putting them on the ground? So elaborating a little bit beyond those barriers.
You first?
Okay. You know, as someone who's seen a couple of projects sort of lose steam, I think one of the challenges has been getting buy-in ahead of time. I think you can get really, really high-minded, really chasing pie-in-the-sky stuff, which can be good if it works out. But the problem is the further you reach out from maybe the practical or the pragmatic that's right in front of you, the more risk you get into that it won't either hit the mark or you've kind of designed something that won't work. So I think for us, getting with the right landowners, that was a lot of discussion. We relied heavily on our land department. Can't give them enough kudos for going out and talking and making sure these folks are going to be okay with a project that was going to last 3 or 4 years after we've left. And so we got really, really good partners. I think we had originally looked at going over like 4 or 5 different counties, and we thought, once you get a sample size that gets too variables and too many things come into play, it becomes, you're finding a little too many variables to make discernible decisions at the end. So I think it was, focusing in, getting with the right landowners, getting all of my organization aligned, so making sure that land was okay with it and that we had operations buy-in and that there was going to be a commitment to the cost part of it for multiple years.
Great.
Was that in the Permian Basin?
Yes, ma'am.
Billy, what about you?
Lessons learned, barriers. I think
biggest challenges or mistakes you've witnessed.
Yeah,
as projects
mistakes.
get
Yeah, that's
started.
lessons learned. Sure. I'll go back to our other projects we have within the Center for Land Stewardship that we're not monitoring well enough. Even though they were written in the proposal, we had a mechanism to make them happen. I think that's probably there needs to be something else there, and I think that's like hiring capacity, making sure there's enough capacity in your proposal to handle the deliverables that you need to provide. If you're trying to make it too affordable, but you want to do that, you want to get the grant, you want to get the gift, you want to do the work, but if you don't build the capacity into your proposal, into your budget, then you can really, once you start moving and you're getting stuff done on the ground, which is what we want to see, that's what we want to do, and we're doing that. And it's great, but are we measuring it enough? And I think that's probably that's at the top of my mind as of late, because we did not get that done on these last projects. So.
Yeah. And we see that across our conservation partner community as well. Folks send us budgets, and we're like, you have the money allocated for the trees, but you don't have the money to pay the people to plant the trees or show what happens on the other side. So
well, this for the Delaware project, that was this is Sam and his team were an investment that we opted to do up front, and one of the best decisions I think we made. So we're going to be able to have that at the end. It's going to really, I think, pay dividends.
Yeah, 100%. And based on this experience, lessons learned, mistakes, whatever you want to call them, how do y'all plan for those going into new projects? Are they part of Travis for your standard operating procedures, or is there anything you've put in place to plan for them as you continue to invest in conservation on the ground?
I think it's communication early, at least from the company side. It's making sure we get the right people in the room, the buy-in, at the very, very start. What you don't want to do is get deep into the planning process and then ask for money, and someone's like, that wasn't in my budget, and so you need to make sure that everyone's on board with the idea, understands the mission, understand how it positively impacts the business, connect those dots for them. And then when it comes to finding the right partner, there's some very credible folks out there, and the relationships I think we have with people in the room help with that. The credibility I don't think is as much of an issue for me, from my perspective. It is the breaking down the barriers and the speed bumps ahead of time, so that when it comes time to say yes, you can.
100%. And Billy, we've been getting a project started along with Sam for the Delaware River Basin project that's funded by ConocoPhillips, and you alluded to it a little bit, but that was one of the best investments we could have made. But could you elaborate a little bit more on what you've seen work well with that project and being a part of just getting the project started?
Yeah, I think that's a good example of being able to find the right partners. If you look at that project and you take, like, for example, Jose Etrich with Texas Parks and Wildlife, who was a wildlife biologist in Culberson County for years, who had established relationships, long-term trusting relationships with those landowners. I don't think we'd be near as far as we are now. We've been very fortunate to have him, but we got him early at the table, and he is very passionate about conservation work, and he saw an opportunity, and he's charging forward with it. And then finding, obviously from some of the recommendations from finding Sam and his team, And I think that was another opportunity to have a great partner at the table when it comes to monitoring and really, their work so far is telling us where we need to work, where we're going to get the most bang for our buck for a lot of different things, primarily, water quantity, water quality in the Delaware River itself. So I think finding those right partners early on and moving forward with them in that way, in that collaborative way.
Yeah, and to build on that, Billy, as projects get started, things can change very quickly and fluctuate depending on the partnerships that are in place. But you mentioned the pronghorn work that's been going on since 2008, various other initiatives like Respect Big Bend. You've been a part of a lot of collaborative work in the Trans-Pecos. Pecos, y'all are the collaborator out there. And would love to hear what your biggest lessons learned in selecting and communicating with all of these diverse partners across West Texas are.
Yeah, I think, I think maintaining those relationships, that's why I typically try to have a Trans-Pecos Conservation Partners call supposedly every quarter. I'm a little late on this one. But that keeps us connected. And then following back up, even the folks don't get in on the call, but we'll have anywhere from 20, 30, 40 different partners on that call. But then follow back up with the minutes. And you see these opportunities like, hooking up biologists from the National Park Service with Texas Parks and Wildlife Inland Fisheries to talk about giant cane control and working together and collaborative. They would not have done that probably had they not met on those calls. And I think that that's diligence, right? That's trying to stay on top of it, stay in communication, which is work. It's a lot of work, and it's making me tired, but it's good work. It's a thing. You see those chances to connect those dots, it makes it all worthwhile, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's a lot of work, which communicating is. How has your communication or just the process of communication collaboration changed over or evolved over the years as you've been doing it?
Well, I think that one of the places where I need to do more work is probably to be more deliberate, like in just personal communications with individuals, especially landowners. I spend so much time in the office now, I haven't maintained those relationships as much as I used to, but I feel like that's important. We've built a lot of credibility and trust out there, and I think that's important to maintain those relationships. But, just me moving, because of COVID, we had to move from a brown bag lunch we used to have for conservation partners. Well, that's only getting the folks right around our office in Alpine. And we had to move to a Teams meeting, and when we did that, we got a whole lot more people at the table. And it's not as good, it's not as fun as face-to-face, but at the same time, we have a lot more folks in the room. And then we are periodically trying to go ahead and have some stuff in the field as well to look at some conservation projects that different partners are doing and share and collaborate in that way.
Yeah, and collaboration with landowners has come up on the first discussion. This discussion is state that's 95% privately owned. It's super important, and whether you're working with individual landowners or landowners that like Apache or ConocoPhillips, it's an important part of making projects work. And I know, Billy, you touched on working with Jose for our Delaware project, and we couldn't really have made any of that happen without his support and those long relationships with landowners that he had in place. But how do those types of strong relationships influence the partners that you work with, the partners that you select? Do you have anything to add on why that's such an important part of work, especially in West Texas?
Yeah, it's just, that's the thing about it. It's knowledge, right? Just the long-term knowledge of understanding and working with our partners, for example, at Parks and Wildlife. That was Jose worked for me when I was there. But at some point I'm going to step away, and there's others that are coming behind me, I think, that are building those relationships and part of that collaborative process. I don't know if I said it on this stage or not, but what's been so rewarding for me is to see, we're in a room today with a lot of folks interested in conservation partnerships. When I started my career with Parks and Wildlife, with Arizona Game and Fish, it was my first job. In the early 90s, one of my bosses said something. I may have said this on the stage before, I don't know. He said, hey, there's 3 ships you got to stay off of: burning ships, sinking ships, and partnerships. And from what his perspective is, a lot of partnerships are somebody coming to you to further their goals with your capacity and resources. And that still happens to a certain extent. But, through my career, I've been so fortunate to be a part of such great partnerships with the Texas Applied Conservation Initiative, the one I'm talking about with the pronghorn. Everything I can see is that is the way you get things done now. That was not the case 30, 40 years ago. It was kind of like, we want to do our business, you do your business. We're not going to get together. But now this is how you get things done at a landscape level, and that's so rewarding. That's just to see that transformation through time is really cool. I had to throw that in there. Sorry.
100%. And Travis, what about from your perspective? How are you selecting on-the-ground partners for conservation work? Obviously, y'all work with BRI, but what goes into those considerations as you're thinking through projects you want to put on the ground?
Yeah, I think it's, technical expertise. One of the bullets I had that I think is really important is having similar motives and objectives on the onset. If you're all kind of marching towards the same objective, then it's much easier to come to an agreement and come to a common understanding. So I think, technical expertise, common goals in mind, right time frames, and just really having a lot of the agreement and kind of frame of mind.
Mm-hmm. And as you're communicating with, I imagine, quite a few partners on various projects across the ground and across your operations across the globe, what are your communication expectations as you work with those partners? So
I think open communication. I won't say a frequency because I think it depends on the time and what's happening and what you're trying to do. I mean, specifically for this partnership right now, we're getting, I think, semi-annual reports. We get one usually a couple months following each observation season where they kind of tell us how things are going, what they're seeing, trends and analysis. I think when I look at it also from a certain level, I don't know all the nuance. Like if you ask me to name a species, I'm not going to be able to help you. But when you say this is, 5 times better than this, and this is, we're seeing, these native grasses take root over here, and wow, that we really didn't expect that. Those are the kind of things that I think get me excited and we want to hear about. But from a communication perspective, they're open with us. We've had a lot of discussions around, changes or, I think one of the things we did recently was we had originally put into our project scope to do a carbon soil analysis. And, it costs some money, and Lalo at BRI said, we can kind of cut this. We're not seeing anything that I think is going to really drive material results for you guys or really going to drive big change. So we can cut this, and we did. And I think that's an important sort of flexibility, mid-cycle pivot. If you're doing things and you're not seeing any progress or you're not seeing results that you would wanted to see, then, cut it, pivot, make it work.
Yeah, and I know that in your slides you mentioned that they're going to be working on a white paper for you to communicate those results. How do you all use that within your operations?
So that's my job, right? Yeah. So I'm going to make sure that with the results that come out of it, if they're positive for the company and it's something that we can put, as part of our standard operating practices, that we do so, and that I convince the organization that it's time and money well spent. The white paper that comes out, it was important to us so that this was also available to to anyone really, so that if you saw that, hey, if we lay soil erosion blankets on, 25% of the site, we can get, roots and grasses and biodiversity to take hold. And people knew that and understood that maybe there's a low barrier to entry to make it significantly better.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing those lessons learned. We've seen really over the past many years, lots of our industry partners publishing their results or lessons learned. We have some linked on our summit resources when your white paper is live. Would love to add it, so let us know.
For sure.
But to pivot a little bit to baseline data collection, so we talked a lot about monitoring, we talked a lot about data today, but collecting baseline data and monitoring progress is so imperative for us to understand the value of the work that we're doing and putting on the ground, right? So understand the value, understand the outcomes and the impacts of conservation projects. We talked a lot about being adaptable, flexible. If you're monitoring and something's not working, like the carbon, you can pivot and say, we may not need to monitor this. Should we monitor something else? Like what's working, what's not? So all of this allows us to make data-based decisions and, again, adaptively manage our projects, which is super important. So to get a little bit into baselines, would love to kind of go down. We'll start with Sam, but how do you define baseline, and has that definition for baseline evolved for you in recent years or through your work?
Yeah, so Travis and I were talking a little bit about this, of how baseline has evolved over recent years. And for us, with natural channel design, we're often looking at a reference condition, something that's upstream of a dam, upstream of a straightened channel, upstream of any source of degradation, and how can we mimic the natural form in our work site? But that's not always available. There's not always a reference condition that you can walk to that's still on the ground, and so we're trying to utilize more technology, satellite imagery, historic imagery, talking with people on the ground. What did this used to look like? How often did this flood? And really trying to establish that baseline for what's not just what was here before we started the project, but what is the highest capacity of this land, and how do we achieve that again?
Great. Billy, what about you?
It's changing, right? Our baseline, historically has been written into our proposals, right? I mean, we cite the problem, we cite the issue, and then we try to build support on addressing it. But I would say that with new technology, especially from a spatial standpoint, your ability to which we don't have that necessarily on my team, but BRI certainly does. And to Sam's point, that ability we're doing more and more and more of that, especially when it comes to stream restoration and grassland restoration or brush management. Just the ability to take that baseline, not only from where you are now and what you want to where you want it to go potentially, what is restored. I mean, that's the question Lalo always brings up. What is restored? Where do you want it to end? Do you want it to look like it did 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 2,000 years ago? Well, there's some things aren't attainable, right? But also, what was it 50 years ago? What was it like before this problem happened? And so I think that's part of the idea is that you can really take a baseline from even further back, but that's all because of technology and the advances in spatial imagery analysis, and so it's changing. It's getting better, I guess.
Yeah. And Travis, at Apache, how do y'all define baseline, or how do you define it?
I think they describe some pretty real challenges with trying to identify what is baseline. For the project we're working on right now, we use just off-site, off-pad. I think measurement, growth, different species types to define what would be an expected baseline. I think, some of that can be difficult. And we are starting to, I think, see using a little more of the satellite and GIS and those types of measurements for what used to be there. I mean, I think sometimes we're using satellite imagery from 60 years ago in some cases to try and see what the landscape looked like beforehand. And so there's a bit of opportunity, I think, in the data, satellite, AI type of stuff, which Sam and I were talking about a little bit before lunch, but baseline's hard to define. Where do you want it to be? Do you even want it to be baseline? Maybe baseline's really not a good example of what you want something to look like after you're done, especially when you're talking about the oil field.
Yeah, 100%. I think in that last video, looks like rocks that grow dirt. So.
Yeah.
And then just digging a little bit deeper into baseline, what frameworks, and any of y'all can answer this, what frameworks or standards are y'all using to define baseline? I know you mentioned satellite and things like that, but are there any standards you're looking at or maybe that are aspirational that you'd like to do or that you're using?
Yes.
And those are?
We're trying to move away, not necessarily utilize standard vegetation monitoring on the ground. It's very labor intensive, it's expensive. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary, depending upon the scale you're working at. But I think that from a vegetation standpoint, I think we're at a point now with spatial analysis where we can take a look at it pretty good right now and see, your subpixel, the pixels are tiny. And that, to me, is what we look at. Where we have challenges like going back to like the 80s and 60s or 70s and 80s especially, when you have these huge pixels and you really can't drill down into the species of plants, but you can look at brush and grass and vegetation gains and losses to us over a large scale. But now we're at a point where I think most of that we're trying to get that done spatially, or drones. We have a lot of drone capacity within BRI as well, and we're doing a lot of our both our vegetation, our brush management work, and our riparian restoration. We're utilizing drone imagery or just LiDAR type stuff to. I'm you take over. I'm stepping off of where I shouldn't be talking.
So recently we've been thinking a lot about this idea of how do you integrate really detailed in situ monitoring with larger scale spatial analyses. And so we have sites where we'll have in situ soil moisture monitoring, for example, where we've restored a site, we've restored wetlands, We've also modeled that, and so we've modeled the structures and how the water would move and where it would infiltrate, how you'd have more infiltration after construction. And then as we monitor that in the ground, we're also tracking that with satellite imagery, and we're trying to draw correlations between the two to show that this is valid data, that you may not have the exact precision, but you can still be accurate in your assumptions from satellite imagery, that the changes that you're showing with trends over time, that you can show the same trends through satellite imagery that you can show with in-ground soil moisture. And when we're talking about 500,000 acre landscapes, it's a really powerful tool that we're trying to continue validating.
That's so much cheaper, so much quicker. You know? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's too a big part of, many of our discussions stay about just making sure that the expectations are aligned. So whatever metrics you're looking for, right, that monitoring is built into the plan, whether it's that very detailed, like we need the on the ground, monitoring of every single plant in this, foot by foot square. We're like, we need them identified to species, or can we use some of this more landscape scale GIS and drone work? But just another question on baseline. As we've all been a part of planning projects, do y'all typically set a baseline for the projects before or after projects are selected, and why? And Travis, we can start with, or you and Billy, if you guys want to tag team it, you probably worked together on this, so.
Say it again.
As y'all have gotten a project started, do you typically set the baseline for the project before or after partners are selected, and why?
I think it depends.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to have your partners in the room to help you establish that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it, for example, for the Apache project, I mean, the partners were really, there was more involved too, I guess. Texas Native Seed was involved. Tony's here. We had some other partners that were required to be in the room, but really Apache and BRI were kind of driving that ship. And so I think the researchers at BRI and the team at Apache kind of worked that all in to begin with. But that's every facet of the project, not just the baseline. But I think lots of times we do it ourselves before we engage partners, but then we want them to be sure and make sure that we're on the right track.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
Yeah, I think also, and I don't know that I mentioned this before, as part of the project, we looked at 15 historical sites that we had recently just done a sort of basic rip and flip is what they call it, but turned over the pad and spread seed and kind of left it be and see what happens. And they collected that baseline, and so that's not necessarily a baseline of what the environment was. It's more of a baseline of how were you doing things in comparative to how you could maybe do things when it comes to reclaiming the site. So I think there's a couple different baselines to assess from my perspective. One is, what is the baseline vegetation that you're is ideal? And then what is the baseline of the outcome from how you have performed the work historically? Yep. And then what's the delta?
Yeah.
Very good point.
And then Sam, would like you to dive a little bit deeper and tell us more about the tools and processes you're using to understand baselines. You touched on some of these, but not only baseline, but conservation need and prioritization, and really building on your introduction. You mentioned the Delaware River Basin project, and can you just share a little bit more about the research and analysis you did for that project and how that's really fundamental to supporting our decision making and really where we're pointing the arrow to put conservation on the ground? Would just love for you to dive a little bit deeper on that.
Yeah, so we kind of tackled this like a research project. We came in as outsiders, so we started with the literature and we started to understand what were people interested in. Are there endangered species? Is there woody encroachment? What are the main issues? From that, we moved more to a core scale filter using publicly available data, for example, soil data sets. And we started to understand from years of research, what is the baseline condition? What is the capacity of this land? Where are areas that have a higher production potential for range versus areas that may have a lower production potential? Where are areas that have gypsum soils that are not going to produce good range ever? And so then from that coarse filter, we moved to more of a fine scale filter, and we started to really dig into the imagery and start to derive indices from aerial and satellite imagery. For example, looking at the NDVI, the normalized difference in vegetation index, to start to understand vegetation health over the landscape. And that we started looking at climate, and we started to understand, are there areas that may have a lower NDVI because they have lower rainfall, or do they have a lower NDVI because of lower soil capacity? We started looking at things like the normalized difference in water index from NAPE imagery. The NAPE program is a really great resource, how it's flown every few years, and it gives you repeat monitoring without having to go out and do that. And we started to understand where is the water on the landscape, and where is that water supporting healthy vegetation? Where is it supporting these riparian corridors along the Delaware River that may be important for migrating birds? From there, we moved further into the field. We looked at the digital elevation model to try to understand where are specific projects, where are head cuts, where are incised channels, where are areas that we could structurally make a difference. And then going out to visit those places on the ground, we took it even a step further with drone imagery of getting overflight data and providing that to landowners as a pre-construction monitoring tool, and also for them to see more of the way that we're thinking about things from a landscape level. And then finally, as I said, we sat down and we drove around with ranchers. We had lunch with ranchers. We asked them, what are your needs and how has this land changed from generations ago? And that was really the most powerful tool, was being able to integrate that top-down and bottom-up approach together and say, this is where we're coming from more of a research perspective and what we're seeing, but what are you guys seeing? And then being able to take that back and say, now with this new knowledge, what are some data sets that can corroborate that? How can we continue to monitor this over time?
Great. So lots of different tools and acronyms. We can spell it for folks later. But I think a big benefit of not only the work that y'all, Travis, are doing with BRI is you're investing the time and money to collect this upfront data so you understand the outcomes. But to build on that, just tools and processes. Billy and Travis, are you guys, I know you're working with us on that, but are you using anything differently across your other projects, or how are you utilizing this type of data to prioritize opportunities or set goals for projects? Any thoughts there?
Well, BRI ourselves, have a lot of the same capacity in the house, and I think that's, like I said, that's where we're at now.
Yeah.
We either have that capacity or we just obtained that capacity with just researchers, and so that's kind of the direction we're heading right now ourselves as well. But obviously, part of that too, it made me think of something, and you're doing this drone imagery, which is just basically do an overflight that you can show a landowner where you're at now, and then come back and show them later where they're at after a restoration project. And that's so impactful, right? That's the stuff that can really make a difference. And that follow-up with that's your most invaluable stakeholder, is your landowner, right? And that follow-up is something we need to work harder at too. We don't always do that, and that's been that way through my whole career. We don't always follow back up. Certain organizations are very good at it, some are not. We try to be. We're not always the best, but something we need to keep front and center all the time is to follow back up and just put it in a digestible format that they understand the difference that was made. So anyway, I just digressed a little bit. I never did get to do my pronghorn stuff yet. Did I miss my opportunity?
Well, I think we'll get to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Story.
Travis, what about you, tools or processes either you're using or that you've seen that other people are using, you're like, wow, like we want to use that? Or
So we haven't, I don't think, brought in the tools and processes to the degree that I think some folks probably here in the room have, and I'm sure Billy and Sam have. But right now we're trying to, I think, establish, a protocol that we could use some tools to create some sort of monitoring and tracking program for how things are turning out for, our sites that we've reclaimed over the past, 5 years or what have you. I think all the tools are not the tools, but the nuts and bolts are there, right? You know where you were, you know what you did, the data set that you have. And so if you were to maybe, we're just kind of thinking through how you would do it now, and how would you set up a benchmark and an expectation as an organization who's routinely reclaiming land on a daily basis. So I think the GIS, the satellite, the even AI tools and some of the plant recognition and coverage, and there's some things out there that could probably be deployed, but I don't think we're mature enough there yet to be using it in our day-to-day, or we haven't been.
Gotcha. And you alluded to a conversation you and Sam had earlier about AI. Any thoughts on how AI may come into play for baseline analysis or monitoring for projects?
That's an idea. It may be something that could happen. I would imagine if you could use historical data current data, match it up, image trace it, and say, hey, tell me how much better it is or worse. You know, maybe that's something ChatGPT could do. Not yesterday, apparently, because I guess it was down, but I don't know. I just think about what are the opportunities there that have maybe not been explored, or some folks might be exploring that I'm just unaware of.
Yeah. Sam, anything to add?
Yeah, I was really hoping we'd get to this question. I think that AI is really a powerful force. It's, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, and it's going to save us a lot of time. Gone are the days of manually digitizing streams. Gone are the days of digitizing vegetation types. If you can provide good training data, whether that's on the ground from your vegetation plots or digitizing polygons and using that as training data, like we did with the remote sensing of water, it can really save you a lot of time and allow you to put more effective conservation on the ground. I think that, as you mentioned with image recognition, that's really a field that's moving at light speed right now. There's new tools coming out every day that researchers are analyzing these vast catalogs of imagery we have going back to the 80s and starting to piece together different ecotypes and how you can see how those have changed over time. And that's such a powerful resource to have 40 years of information curated for you. And I think it's really part of the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And then for all three of you, again, once the partners are selected, the baseline is established, what methods are you using for progress monitoring and reporting? And Billy, we can start with you. I think your pronghorn example may fit well here, and just how you all showed the results of that with landowners.
Obviously lots of different monitoring efforts and different ways to monitor, but what we did with the pronghorn project, this hit me on the way up here, driving up here, was like, because we, like I said before, we had this basically landowner-driven initiative with conservation partners around the table, veterinarians, everybody around the table that had this passion for pronghorn. And because the department supported it so much, Parks and Wildlife supported it so much, we were able to collar more pronghorn over several years that could have never, there's never been that type of a pronghorn research project done to date, you know, and it continues. We still have animals collared. But what we wanted to learn, like I said before, was like, for example, when you collar pronghorn, when you catch pronghorn and throw them in a trailer or in a box, which is the way we've always done business, you think that's the right way to do it. That's because it's always been done that way. We found out real quick that if you monitor, like they call it capture myopathy, after an animal's released, if it's gotten too stressed at some point during that capture, it may die a week later from that stress. But if you don't have an animal collared, you don't know that happened, right? So it turns out all across North America, we thought we were doing great work with pronghorn. We just weren't monitoring enough. We were killing more than we thought we were, and that's not good. Well, we found out that if we don't stick them in boxes and we put them into open-top trailer or a trailer with a high ceiling, those animals seem to survive a lot better. They were under less stress. So that changed the way we do business, and it changed really for the whole country. All conservation agencies now that move pronghorn have adapted the way that we did this because of all that effort. The thing that you didn't think about was, okay, stay with me. Okay, so in the 1940s, during the World War II, the sheep and goat, or the wool and mohair incentives got most landowners in the Trans-Pecos to switch over to sheep and goats, hair goats. And so all the fences got changed to net wire fences, which are not pronghorn friendly. Pronghorn can jump over a net wire fence, but they tend not to. They want to go under fences. And so since the 1950s till the mid to 2010, 2011, what biologists in the Trans-Pecos have been trying to get landowners to lift their fences or change them out and put net wire, take net wire out and put barbed wire with smooth wire, or even barbed wire, at least 16 to 18 inches high off the ground. To facilitate these movement, they need to move, right? They weren't going to do it. I mean, very few were going to do it. They said, why do I want my neighbors have my pronghorn? I make money off them every year hunting them. I want to keep them on my place. Well, part of this effort was we put these GPS collars on these pronghorn, and now we're getting, literally millions of points out there of where these animals are on the landscape. You couple that with, at the same time, we had this disease issue going on with these barber pole worms, homunculus worms. When these animals get stressed, if they can't move, then they are forced to eat where they poop in these deeper soils, and they're picking up these incredible loads of these blood-sucking worms in their gut. And it was actually killing some animals. And the animals knew about that. Plus, it was just putting another stressor besides drought on them, blah, blah, blah. All that to say, because we now had a visual aid to show that you could see where these animals are bottling, they're stacked up on a fence line. They want to go south or they want to go north, but they can't because the fences won't allow it. They're trapped in this pasture. That's a visual aid, right? And you couple that with the fact that once we were able to facilitate some movement, their worm loads decreased immensely, and they were fine. Those two things together, which were unintended by monitoring, literally changed the mindsets of traditional landowners and the Trans-Pecos over a period of a few years. And suddenly, it's no problem putting new fences in. It's no problem pulling up that bottom wire. It's all over millions of acres. I mean, that quick. And that was not the intent of that monitoring effort. But that was such an impactful result, I guess, is the point. Yeah. It accidentally happened, and it was a great thing.
Yeah.
I knew it.
I just want to point out that Pronghorn Action Working Group that Billy's talking about, I don't think that it gets enough recognition even within the state of Texas, and certainly throughout the rest of the working pronghorn states. When that project was originally started, Billy alluded to the capture myopathy, and these pronghorn are very, very stressed animals. And like Billy said, you can catch about 100 of them, you release them. And at the time when all of that initiated, I think we were losing about 25% of those pronghorn because of capture myopathy. And Texas Parks and Wildlife, BRI, the landowners, the veterinarians, we really all dived in and took a hard look at it. And we got information from all the other western states with pronghorn. And under, I usually don't give Billy a lot of credit.
He means that.
Under Billy's leadership at the top there with Texas Parks and Wildlife, we were able to knock capture mortality down from about 22% to about 8%. And that was through collaboration. I mean, we had, I don't know how many partners involved in that. And we went to, I think we hosted a pronghorn workshop in Alpine. Gosh, you're going to have to remind me, but it was like
12? 15? Was it that late?
Oh, God, I can't remember.
Well, it's when you were on board, yeah.
And Texas, and this is, I hope Mr. Bush is still in the room, because talking about Texas Pride, when we started reporting those results to the other states, knocking down capture myopathy rates from 22% to 8%, we blew every other state out of the water. I think our numbers help me on this, Billy. Hands on pronghorn times, we cut from about 8 minutes per individual from when a helicopter lands on the ground, from about 8 minutes to I think it was 3.5 minutes. Hands on, that's collaring, treating, putting, everything that we had to do in the trailer. And every other state came to us in our action working group and said, man, can you guys share your methodology with us? So
we wrote the book. We wrote the book on capturing pronghorn for the rest of the country. Because of that investment. Because of that investment from the department and putting that many collars on animals. That's what did it. And that's exactly what got the landowner mindset to change too. Yeah. Investment up front, which by the way, it's sad that many pronghorn are dying. That's also not a good investment. If you're killing one out of 4, there's a lot of money tied up in that animal.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. And I think a great lesson learned and why long-term monitoring is important, and you're able, with the results like our reduction in mortality, you're able to share those and either, like you said earlier, garner funding, garner support, and I think just a great lesson learned and all the collaboration it takes to make some projects like this a reality. And we like to say at Texas Nature, Texas is a collaborative conservation model for the world, so great to hear that other states are learning from the work being done in Texas. And then monitoring. It can be really expensive, right? We've talked a lot about that today, and we talk a lot about it every day at our work at Texas Nature. But any suggestions from any of you on efficient tools or methods that provide the needed data in a cost-effective way? We touched on this a little bit with the drone versus like going out in the field, but anything to add to that conversation? Sam, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, there's new data sets coming out every year. We try to keep up to date on the latest research so that we're understanding what new tools are out there. One that I've come across recently is called the Rangeland Analysis Platform. And this is a really incredible tool. What they did is they they looked at the past catalog of Landsat and Sentinel imagery and actually classified based on 82,000 ground plots. Basically, they looked at the western states from those 82,000 plots and used that as training for a machine learning model to classify vegetation types from imagery. And so from 2015 on, you can get 10-meter imagery that will single out invasive annual grasses, native perennial grasses, pinyon juniper encroachment. And tools like that, I think, are just going to become the norm. Once we learn to trust them, and this is something that's been validated by 82,000 ground plots, once we learn to trust them more, we can really eliminate a lot of the need for on-the-ground sampling by using these data sets, and especially if we give ourselves a long enough monitoring period, multiple years, to allow for this new imagery to come out, to allow for multiple years so that we can account for things like a bad drought that may affect your NDVI and your greenness, but then you get a couple years later and you've returned back to your normal cycle. Tools like the rangeland analysis platform, I think, are really going to become the future of monitoring, low-cost monitoring.
I will say from an education standpoint that, we also, at Borderlands Research Institute, we're also part of Sol Ross's natural resource management program, and we're turning out, conservation professionals every year. We recognize that too, and we want to incorporate it, but we're still going to make them get out and get their hands dirty. We're still going to make them get out and collect grasses and plants, and still, because so they can see, right? And you want to do the same. You want to go out there and take a look at it as well. So anyway, that's not going away.
Travis, any tools or methods that y'all are using just to get the data in a cost-effective way?
I think everything that Sam and Billy are doing are the building and developing and sort of testing the tools that the industry can use, when it's necessary and needed. I think we rely on all this, but there's so much change happening, and there's so many things that are better that we're not necessarily on the cutting edge of, and honestly, not expected to be so. But it's exciting to hear that these things are being developed and they're being put forth, and they're practical to be used by, I think, folks within our industry and organizations.
Great. And then as we're talking about the cost of monitoring, budgets, building the business case for conservation, Travis, would just love your insights on, as your work at Apache and making conservation operational assessment or investment, what do you wish conservation NGOs or the projects you work with or landowners understood about your business or decision-making process when it comes to investing to on-the-ground projects?
I think having realistic expectations on results is important. I think there's, when we develop these projects and we're trying to, I think, figure out what's best for the land in the area in which we're trying to return, it's important that, we're all on the same page and developing the right expectations and the right priorities and expectations across all sides. So I think it's pragmatic solutions, it's things that are cost effective, it's things that are durable over time. I think that durability is going to lead to success, across all different companies.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then, Billy, kind of want to flip that question to you as well. What do you wish industry, as a conservation organization that's developing projects, what do you wish industry better understood about on-the-ground conservation work taking place and the budget needed to deliver the work on the ground?
Well, we work with such good partners. I think it's all been pretty easy so far. I think that like I mentioned before, is understanding why I'm asking for extra capacity to monitor, to really monitor and publish, right? So we can share that information with other conservation partners, other industries partners, and make sure that it gets out there. That's something that's on the budget. It may not always look real important, but it really is. And I'm realizing, this is me realizing that through not getting it done in the past. I'm going to try my best not to let that happen for future grant or gift opportunities, to make sure that there's a line item in the budget for us making sure that we do monitor and we do record and we put it in a format that's understandable to the general public and our practitioners.
Thank you, Billy. And for the conservation orgs in the crowd, we've had great conservation partner meetings recently on measuring what matters and building budgets. So we have recordings of all of those, which are great resources. So making sure that you have all those line items in place on your budget to make sure that you can monitor everything and pay the people to monitor. But we'll start wrapping up here just with a quick lightning round. So we'll go with each of you, but what's one thing, tool, or process you recommend the audience to look at to transform their project implementation and progress evaluation? Sam, we'll start with you.
I think one thing is drones. They're really becoming a lot more inexpensive, and the training is available, and you can really cover a lot of land. You can even create 3D models to bring back to your office and walk through and do a virtual site walkthrough. That's been one of the most powerful tools that we've been using in the past few years.
He stole mine. He really did. That's where I was going. I think that's what we've realized with our increase in drone capacity at Sul Ross, at BRI, is that, that is a really good way. It's that intermediary, right, between doing on-the-ground veg surveys and Landsat analysis. If you could sit there and have that drone can give you some real good information real quick. We're utilizing them actually for like aerial application of herbicide now. Some of these agricultural drones where we can map out ahead of time, and we're going to try to go out and kill a lot of mesquite or something. But if we've got some desirable oaks or something else in there, we want to go ahead and miss those, so the drone will miss them. They do fly and they do run into stuff, and they sometimes come down, but still, they're a big tool, great tool. Thanks for serving that up. We didn't talk about that at the time.
I think for us, when it comes to reclamation remediation, the satellite imagery has been really useful for us. In oil and gas, you do a lot of land clearing, but you don't necessarily know what's being cleared 30 years ago because it could have been pushed back over. So getting a little bit of historical analysis on what used to be there 30, 35 years ago has been pretty important for us to understand causes, identify potential release points and different things like that to help us do reclamation remediation when needed. And then in terms of processes, we do not have the same expertise as Billy and Sam within our organization. So we lean heavily on these folks for their technical expertise, no doubt. And we're leaning on them to tell us what's best. Yeah. And that's important to us.
Great, and a lot of the tools y'all are recommending, again, they save time and they save money, which is a big thing when you're working in these large landscapes. But I have a few minutes left, but to wrap up, just want to echo some of the sentiments from our discussion today. So echoing Robert from the last panel, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. We can't do our work without working with our partners, whether they're in our backyards or in different states. I mean, a lot of other folks in North America or across the world are facing similar challenges or lessons learned. So just encourage y'all to reach out to folks within your industry or outside your industry to collaborate with others. And the work that all of conservation organizations are doing across Texas is so valuable, but we can't understand our impacts, right, if we don't monitor on the ground data to show that what we are doing is valuable. And to Billy's point, if you're able to show the value of your work, the outcomes, you're able to go and say, this work, replenishes this much water, or it, increases the biodiversity of this, type of wildlife or this habitat, and you're able to go and seek funding, whether that's from folks like, Travis, and that project may become a part of their standard operating procedures, like the work that you're doing. So they're putting this habitat on the ground as they're working. So I think just all the work that we're doing has great ripple effects, but it doesn't happen unless we're all talking to each other and sharing these lessons learned and evaluating our progress along the way so we can understand, again, what works, what doesn't work, and then we can go back and adaptively manage those projects. And, whether that's, changing a process or changing a partnership or bringing in a new partner to build on that project. So thank you guys for your time today. It's a wonderful discussion, and I think we have a few minutes left, but are we good to go? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Good job. Yeah, good job.
Well done, dude.
Good job.
Thank you.
Hey, good job, man.
All my life I've been associated with some sort of earth science interest. What I've found is a therapy that comes from being outside.
To me, being outside is restorative. It makes me feel like I am one with nature.
I found that developing a community of naturalists encourages all of us really to fall in love with nature. And when we fall in love with nature, we protect what we love, right?
My name is Mike Farley.
My name is Cynthia Chrysler.
My name is Sonia Koshurik. I'm a Texas Master Naturalist.
I am a Texas Master Naturalist.
I'm a Texas Master Naturalist.
Texas Master Naturalist Program is a volunteer training and development program. We train our volunteers to assist us in the field, doing outreach, education, stewardship projects, research, and give back to conservation.
So Texas natural resources are under an increasing amount of pressure. With thousands of folks moving to Texas on a daily basis, we have a need for management of these ever-changing resources, needs for conservation education to our public, and so the Texas Master Naturalist Program is here and ready to serve that changing Texas.
The Texas Master Naturalist Program has trained more than 17,000 volunteers across the state during its 25-plus year time frame. These volunteers exist in chapters across the state that are as diverse as the ecological regions and communities that they serve.
They've discovered new species of wolf spiders and plants, and they're often some of the first people to spot invasive species, so we can be on the forefront of making sure that those don't spread.
Anybody can be a volunteer, but in the Master Naturalist Program, they train you to be more knowledgeable, to be a better volunteer.
Ornithology, natural resource management, local plant ecosystems, citizen science, and how to engage in the conservation of those species that they're learning about. We have over 45 chapters, and our Master Naturalists do everything.
As one person who works roughly 50 hours a week, there's only so many projects that I can do and see to fruition. But when we put together a group of 167 plus volunteers, that impact is magnified exponentially.
Being a Master Naturalist, of course, it's supposed to be giving back to your community, but it's a lot more than that. And the more people that understand what's happening in the world, the better off it is.
Different people come to the program for different reasons. Overall, they want to learn more, they want to make a difference, they want to meet like-minded people. And so if I could sum up Master Naturalists in just one word, it's passion.
I think one of my favorite things about the program is I'm a lifelong learner surrounded by lifelong learners. That's one of their best ways how they engage the public. They make the natural world and the creepy crawly things that people might not even like sound interesting and sound fun.
Many of us adults, we've forgotten that there's a whole system out here that takes care of us and that we, in turn, must take care of it. The training began, it was intensive, it was fun, and I haven't stopped.
I think it's humbling to see that the special piece that so many people take away from the Master Naturalist Program is the community relationships, is the people, it's the family that they found. So many of our conservation community partners need volunteers. They have a capacity need, and our Texas Master Naturalist volunteers are here and ready to serve that purpose.
All right, well, thank you again to Taylor and Travis and Billy and Sam for sharing your insights and being willing to dive into lessons learned, what hasn't worked, and very excited to apply some of those lessons as we leave here today. So we are going into a quick break. We'll get back together in about 30 minutes, so we'll restart at 3 o'clock. There's snacks and beverages right outside the door, so enjoy, and I will see you back here at 3. Don't forget, there are resources available at the QR codes, and there should be signs out there if you're looking for resources from the last discussion.